50 secrets and Easter eggs in Assassin's Creed Shadows. And thanks to Ubisoft for the early code. Hidden in Japan's mountains, you can follow a path of secrets that leads you to a chest. Although we're more focused on what's next to this box, a giant boulder perfectly sliced in half. Now, anime fans will immediately know this as a reference to the first season of Demon Slayer, where Tanjiro uses his power to slice a huge rock in half. In fact, this part of the anime is inspired by a real-life Japanese boulder that's also mysteriously cut in two. And if we're talking about finding iconic Japanese locations, you have to grab a boat and sail to the middle of Lake Biwa to the secret island. This is Okishima, and when you land here, you'll immediately notice something different. This entire island is full of cats.
Look at that tiny face.
Yeah, this is one of Japan's real-life cat islands, and it's hiding out in AC Shadows. But when you're running around as Naoe, her assassination will be familiar to the most OG Assassin's Creed fans. Back in AC3 before the game was released, Connor actually used this exact same animation during his kills. However, this was later scrapped when the game came out. Now, 13 years later, it's officially back in the franchise. Although, while roaming the open world of Shadows, you might come across this farmer in distress.
My radishes! My precious, precious radishes!
Remind you of anything?
My cabbages!
And this Avatar reference is only one of Shadow's countless secrets. When playing as Yasuke, he's not exactly the lightest person out there, so when you try to walk on tightropes, yeah, not the greatest for trying to be stealthy, right? But what is perfect for your stealth run is the fact Ubisoft just added the most requested feature in Assassin's Creed history. The double assassination is finally back after 10 years. And it's not just some technicality either. You can actually unlock this in the skill tree, and now when you approach two enemies near each other...
Nice.
Yeah, this wouldn't be a true Assassin's Creed without referencing other games. Whenever you're playing as Yasuke, you can use a bow. Now, obviously my first thought was, what happens if I shoot someone in the knee? Well...
Do not point that out!
Yeah, that trophy was the iconic Skyrim Easter egg.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
But let's take things over to Kyoto, one of the largest cities in the game, where you can be easily distracted from your objectives just to admire the insane details. Walking around, you can catch things like citizens watching a doll show. You can also check out a music performance. But my favorite's gotta be this dad teaching his daughters how to fight. As for Yasuke himself, he struggles to find the courage when making a leap of faith. So usually he drops a small line after leaving the haystack.
I am fine. This is fine.
However, there's an extremely rare chance he'll actually say this.
I am getting too old for this.
A nice little reference to the 80s film Lethal Weapon.
I'm too old for this.
Now, if you love supernatural tales, there are rumors in Japan of evil spirits named yokai. These are supernatural creatures that have been talked about for centuries, and while exploring, you might hear an NPC talk about encountering one.
She was hideous, crooked and moaning. Others saw her too.
Sounds like my auntie.
Want to see her? I hear she only comes out at night.
The only option is to go and investigate these claims for yourself. There are rumors of the Suika no Bakemono, aka the watermelon monster. This is a real yokai tale in Japan, and there's even paintings of them. Well, it turns out you can actually find them in AC Shadows. As you approach, you'll quickly realize they're not as scary as you think.
The title of Melon Lord goes to Suika!
No yokai here. Just two farmers with a fiery passion for melons.
Yeah, so I guess yokai aren't real after all. Although, if you compare this to the paintings, I'd say it's a pretty easy mistake to make. But this next Easter egg will only be noticed by the most keen-eyed players. While buying items from merchants, some of them will actually sell you new horses for you to equip. And one of my personal favorites has gotta be Ringo. This good apple steadily prances on beat. Yeah, his name and description are a big tribute to Ringo Starr, the drummer of the Beatles. And the references continue with a simple parkour move that's secretly part of the biggest anime in the world. Whenever you get on top of a roof, Naue pulls off an insane ninja run.
Best if I remain unseen.
But if this feels familiar to you, that's actually because it's inspired by the iconic Naruto run. Ubisoft even admitted that this is an on-the-nose reference, so I guess they're huge fans. As for Yasuke, he's not an assassin, he's a samurai. So whenever you sneak up on an enemy and try to pull off an assassination, he'll actually refuse to kill anyone behind their back.
Look at me!
One of the funniest details I discovered during my time with Shadows was this innocent-looking dog in the street. He totally stands out amongst the rest due to his bright bandana.
Such a handsome pup.
Now, most players would see this and move on like I did. Well, that's until I came back a few minutes later and his owner showed up.
No, Fujimaru! Get back here! Fujimaru!
And that's not the only impressive secret. One of Naue and Yasuke's attacks allows you to straight up kick enemies. And obviously, this will give you the urge to boot them off castles. But that's when a familiar achievement pops up. This is Ubisoft's response to the iconic scene from 300.
This is Sparta!
Yeah, this is Japan, actually. Now, we've touched on why Yasuke isn't made to be an assassin, but I think the true evidence lies at his parkour skills. Not only is he super slow on rooftops, but he also doesn't fit through holes in the wall, and his leap of faith straight up destroy haystacks. I gotta admit though, it is insanely cool how vastly different our protagonists are. And it wouldn't be a game set in Japan without touching on one of their most famous anecdotes. You can overhear some NPCs talking about how they actually saw the three wise monkeys.
Look at me. You think I don't know the difference between a meditating monkey and a sleeping one?
They look the same.
3 monkeys in front of a statue. One covering its eyes, one its ears, and one its mouth. Does that sound like sleeping to you?
They're referring to an ancient saying of see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. And I guess these guys just saw real monkeys doing it. But this open world is absolutely full of stuff to do, like exploring an ancient kofun for legendary loot. Kofun roughly translates to tomb. And once you've completed one of these, you'll get this tongue-in-cheek achievement calling you Tomb Raider. I bet Lara Croft would be proud. And one of the coolest features in the game is the Hideout. It's an entirely customizable space just for you and your recruits. In fact, every time you invite an NPC here, they will actually interact with other people.
Out there, you're a scout. Here, you fix things.
Yes, Miss Tomiko. I'll get my tools.
However, the best detail has to be the fact that you can find the other protagonist here. If you play as Naue, you'll walk into the Hideout and spot Yasuke practicing his sword routine. Oh, and this one's hard to notice unless you're really looking for it, but you'll never unsee it once I tell you. Anytime you enter an interior, the game will automatically remove your shoes. This is actually custom to do in Japan as you enter people's homes. And while you're out completing those objectives, don't forget about the contracts. These are timed missions with good rewards, and if you complete one of them in every single province, it says, this is a BioShock Easter egg, referencing the way Atlas forces you to obey commands with the phrase,
Would you kindly?
Now, there is one detail in the game which 99% of fans would never pick up on. During one of the cutscenes, Yasuke keeps getting distracted by a sumo wrestling match.
At least now you don't have any other distractions. You can go watch the match up close.
Most players would simply overlook this, but it's an incredible nod to the fact that Yasuke was a sumo wrestler in real life. In fact, one of the only paintings we have of Yasuke is him wrestling. All of this referenced by a simple moment in the game. And Shadows is full of insanely small references nobody notices. In Kyoto, there's a painting school you can discover, and on the walls are tons of real-life paintings from the era. One of these includes this portrait of the famous poet Ariwara, but not all secret discoveries are wholesome. In the middle of the forest, you can encounter a tiny pond called the Bloody Head Well. A pretty ominous name, and it only gets darker when you swim underneath the surface. At the bottom, a chest surrounded by dozens of skulls. Inside, you'll get the toxic Kusarigama of Wounding, an absolutely brutal looking weapon with the backstory of this place being a total mystery. So let's liven up the mood with a hilarious secret instead. While riding on your boat, be careful of smashing into other people. Looks like you straight up annihilated that guy. Although, you can't laugh it off because NPCs actually swim to shore perfectly safe. Now, when it comes to new game releases, everyone always wonders, can you pet the dog? Well, you've probably caught on by now that yes, you can pet all dogs and cats in AC Shadows. But what you might not have known is that once you've done it, you'll actually earn them as a placeable pet for inside your hideout. You can put down as many of these little guys as you want, creating an entire field of animals, even including rabbits and small deer.
Sweet creature.
This game is full of wildlife native to Japan, just like the iconic macaques. Even underwater, you'll find things like sharks, jellyfish, and manta rays. But one of the coolest details is how you can paint the animals. If you spot them doing something interesting in the wild, like rabbits boxing, you can save that moment forever with a painting. A more underrated detail has to be the fact that you could chop down bamboo. The game teaches you this pretty early on, but it also doesn't tell you how useful it is. When you come across huge bamboo fences like this, they're impossible to parkour over. So let me give you a tip. Just simply whip out your sword. Be careful taking your sword out around NPCs though. You can scare these guys so much that they'll start running away from you, and if you chase them long enough, they'll drop to their knees and start begging for mercy. And while we're on the topic of insane details, usually in Assassin's Creed, you haven't been able to swim far with your horse. In some games, it doesn't work at all, and in others like Valhalla, you need to actually teach them how to swim. However, in AC Shadows, you could go far deep into the water until eventually they kick you off and swim back to the shore themselves. Speaking of horses, while riding them, you could switch your posture to control Naue instead, letting you jump off for a surprise attack. Although, if you try this on Yasuke, he doesn't have the agility, so there just isn't a posture button. Oh, and be super careful when going for stealth kills on samurai. These guys are so trained that they know when you're sneaking up on them and will actually block your assassination. The only way to avoid this is by sneaking up on them from behind or upgrading your skill tree to be more ruthless. Now, the weather in this game absolutely blew me away when playing. I mean, the thunderstorms are gorgeous and full of detail. From it creating shadows to hide in, to swaying the trees, and even making your clothes fly around in the wind. But that's not all. During rainy weather like this, NPCs will cover their head as shelter and dogs will shake off their fur. But here's a super useful tip when navigating Shadow's tombs. It's basically a total maze down here, so make sure you light up candles to remember where you've been. This trick is especially helpful for leaving without getting lost. And I gotta say, Ubisoft seriously went out with all the minute details. When opening doors, it's pretty noisy. But what about if you're crouched? Ah, that's much better. And make sure to keep an eye out around towns because you can actually find homeless people with nowhere to go. Not only are they dirty from not being able to bathe, but some of them are even laid out on the ground with bad sunburns. But what about the townsfolk who were just made homeless? Well, you can find plenty of burnt down towns on the map and even encounter children mourning the loss of their home. This one was genuinely sad. Now, say what you want, but the attention to detail in this open world is astonishing. And that's without even mentioning seasons. The game constantly switches between them, including winter, which changes everything. Ponds and lakes freeze over, letting you walk or even slide around on them.
What the hell?
There's also icicles hanging from rooftops that can alert enemies if they fall nearby. But it's not the only time you can get exposed. There are plenty of unarmed guards around hostile areas, and while you wouldn't find them dangerous, do not underestimate them. If you get spotted during a crime, they'll run to the nearest armed guard and try to alert them. Instead, I recommend hiding in shadows. It's one of the series' latest additions where you can actually stalk enemies from real shadows, giving you an insane advantage at night. If you find a room lit up, just extinguish the flames and you can create your own cover. But maybe you just want to relax and enjoy the scenery of Japan. Well, you could secretly hop on a stranger's boat and just sit down for the ride. Being honest, it's pretty relaxing. And those were 50 secrets, Easter eggs, and details in AC Shadows. It's been Sammy. Keep it here on T5G.